Hi, everybody. So this is the thesis and opposing view part of the lesson. We're going to read the arguments, both for and against the thesis from the eSports introduction and conclusion that we just read. Before we jump into that, I just want to review ethos, logos, pathos, and review the pieces of the quote sandwich. So ethos. Ethos is credibility. We want to think about resume, qualifications like that. Could be degrees, work experience. Again, anything that goes on a resume would be included here. Experience. Logos is logic. We talked about the logical argument of the kids with the stick on the playground. So the example there is, imagine you have a kid hitting other kids with a stick on the playground. What do? Do you A, give the other kids on the playground a stick to fight back? Do you B, give the teacher a bigger stick so they can defeat the student? Or do you C, take the stick away from the student? Logically, it seems like it makes sense that you would take the stick away. That would be an example of a logical argument. If we also think about the ice and water argument from The Daily Show, where there's ice in the water and it has displacement and it's not overflowing, but then there's ice on the land, and he takes the ice and he puts it in there to show how it's going to overflow, that would be another logical argument. Logos also includes statistics, graphs, charts. Anytime you have data, science in general. Pathos is emotion. It could be humor, like The Daily Show, making you laugh. Oops. Humor. It can also be stories, anecdotes, anecdotes. Again, think about your essay number 1. That entire essay is one big pathos argument. Okay, let's talk about the quote sandwich pieces. Again, for your essay 2, you're only going to have 2 choices here at the beginning. We have the claim, which is the argument you are making, whatever that is, argument you are making. So it might be that marijuana should be legal. It might be that we should abolish the death penalty. It might be that college admissions process is unfair. It might be pro-life versus pro-choice, picking one of those sides. Again, you want to keep coming back to the claim. This is an argumentative paper, so when you have information, you want to come back to that claim and repeat it. Generally, each paragraph needs at least one sentence stating what the claim is that you're arguing for. Then we get ethos for the author. Oops, that was weird. Ethos for the author. Again, the first time we meet an author, we want some ethos about who they are. Again, a half a sentence is fine. A good way to do this sometimes can be to just Google the author's name and find out a little bit about who they are. Remember that citing that they are the author of the article that you are using is not enough. We need a little bit more. And again, half a sentence is fine, but we do need a little bit more. The third part is evidence. Evidence. It can be a quote or a paraphrase where you put things in your own words. And again, we have ethos, logos, and pathos. Remember that for your essay number 2, we need at least one example of each of those. It can be stacked more one way than the other depending on your topic. Some topics it's easier for logos, some topics it's easier for pathos. But do remember you need at least one example of each one. Number 4 is commentary. Commentary is where you discuss the claim and evidence pair in your own words. Discuss claim and evidence pair in your own words. In general, we need at least a sentence here, probably no more than 5. Commentary is also the potential spot to give us a transition sentence into your next paragraph, whatever that might be. The final piece is citation. If you're introducing the author in that sentence, that counts as citation. But it is important to weave your sources throughout. Remember, I allow one moment of personal experience knowledge. It's optional. You don't have to use that. But other than that moment, everything needs clear citation, and you need to weave your sources throughout. Don't assume that because the first 2 sentences are from a specific source, that it's clear that sentences 3, 4, and 5 are also from that source, because it's not clear. You definitely need to repeat it, and the goal there is to weave your sources throughout. Okay. Let's look at this person's esports paper, and we will start first with their thesis, which is that esports should be considered a real sport, and then we'll look at opposing view. So let's read this together. Video games should be considered a sport because, like traditional sports, being a professional gamer is a real career option. So we get claim number 1 here. The argument is that like it's a real career option like real sports, therefore it should be considered. Studies from Omar Jimenez on CNN, which is a well-respected American news-based channel founded by Ted Warner in 1980. So we get some good ethos, in this case, about the source. And you may need to do that sometimes. It does happen occasionally that an author just doesn't exist on the internet and you can't find stuff. If that is happening to you, please reach out. I'll help you try and find ethos, although sometimes the answer is that there isn't any, which is why in this case this person is citing ethos about the source instead of about Omar. Are starting to prove this true. In places around the United States like New York and California, students are starting to be awarded scholarships, which make the career trajectory for esports is more similar to traditional sports than it's ever been, from high school and college to pro. So we're getting a good quote here. We have good citation. Again, notice that even though this is a new sentence, we're getting making it clear where it's coming from. And the argument here is that if you get scholarships for traditional sports, it's happening for esports. This is an argument that esports should be considered a sport. Let's keep going. In major league sports like football or basketball, a student can get a scholarship based on their athletic abilities and continue their sport all the way through the pro status. So that is the comparison, right? The one thing I would say here is that we need citation where these ideas are coming from. But again, the comparison makes sense, and this is good for the paper. The fact that video games are now reaching this level of maturity as a sport shows parallelism between what people call actual sports and esports. Now families can even be supported by taking a career as a professional athlete. So that, like the sentence just before that, is some commentary. They're discussing the ideas that they just presented. And then we get a repeating of the claim, basically, that now families can even be supported by one taking the career as being a professional video game player. According to Tom Huddleston Jr., an entrepreneur writer for CNBC. So ethos here is okay. I think you get away with it. Adding the entrepreneurial part is a little bit more than saying that he's the author, but it's sort of borderline. But then we get some more here, which is widely known as an American channel owned by NBC Universal Broadcast. So there you go. Sorry, I'm wrong. That's better ethos there. Good. Says that professional athletes receive a salary of around $7.7 million on average. As traditional sports players do, esports pro players can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and compete for millions of dollars in prizes. With receiving this amount of money, this could be a career that would provide for a family comfortably. Even though most traditional sports make more than what esport makes in a year, a person does not need millions of dollars to be able to provide a substantial living environment for themselves. So we get some logos. And again, the comparison here is that if esports are a viable career option, that is a similarity to traditional sports, therefore they should be considered a traditional sport. Notice a formatting issue here. Just they put push return by accident, so we just want to move that up. That's worth 1/4 of a point, not a huge deal, but a little formatting issue. Okay, let's keep going. Since video games present the same qualities as traditional sports, they should be considered a sport. So again, this is exactly what we want. A nice, clear, direct claim arguing for the thesis that esports be considered a sport. In this case, we're going to be talking about qualities that are similar. According to Ryan, who was a blog content manager at IT Tech since 2008, so we get some excellent ethos here about Ryan. This is good ethos. Let me change the page here. We will keep going. And earned his MBA, Master of Business Administration degree from Santa Clara State University. So we're getting even a little bit more. And again, I think that first half a sentence was enough, but he gives us more, which is excellent. Video games do present similarities to traditional sports. Ryan does not have a last name. So he's pointing that out. Again, that happens sometimes. Sometimes they only have a last name. Sometimes they only have a first name. If you're running into issues like that, just do what he did here and put a note in the text so that I know. Same thing if you have an author or a source that you just ethos is not coming up, which does happen. Not a lot, but occasionally. If you are running into that roadblock, just let me know. And I will either won't take points off or I'll help you look. In either case, we will solve the problem. And again, remember how I was saying he defines his sport, he defines it here. And again, we would rather have him put this definition in introduction instead of here, but it is in the paper, which is good. A sport is defined as an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So again, remember, that when it comes to citation of a definition, you're actually going to cite the word. So it's going to look like this. It's going to look like that instead of citing Oxford Dictionary. For instance, basketball is considered a sport because it is a game played between two teams of 5 players in which goals are scored by throwing a ball through a netted hoop fixed above each end of the court. So we're getting an actual definition from the dictionary of what basketball is. Again, we want to notice the citation is that it should be basketball in quotation marks like that, as opposed to saying Oxford again. But I think it's really good that we're getting a nice, clear definition of what basketball is. By doing this action while playing basketball, it fulfills the requirement of physical exertion and skill. Traditional sports contain numerous amounts of competitions, wins and losses, athletic ability, physical activity, fans and entertainment, stadiums, fields, arenas, and practice dedication. So we're getting a list of what includes in sports. And again, I want you to notice that we're getting a good job that we're weaving this Ryan source throughout. So even though Ryan was introduced at the beginning, we don't assume that it's from Ryan. We get a good citation to let us know that it is from Ryan. These are filled by video games, but some that are opposed to esports fail to see the correspondence. One of the easiest aspects to compare is that video games are competitive. So we get a clear argument here. We got a definition of a sport. One of the parts of the definition is about competition, and we're going to argue here that video games are competitive. In video games, there are player versus player, battle royale, 2v2, and other game modes that show competitiveness. For instance, one game that consists of all game modes is Fortnite. Notice that Fortnite goes in italics there. Video games go in italics. Some game modes in Fortnite are solo, duo, squads, and 50v50. Fortnite Battle Royale. So again, notice we're getting a good citation there. It's the title of the article instead of the author. We are, however, missing some ethos. So we would like in this moment to be introduced to whatever the source is. I believe it was a website. And just give us a half a sentence about that website, whatever it is. Video games hold sport-like qualities when it comes to coordination, responsiveness, and stamina. So again, we're getting a claim there. So we started competitive. We gave evidence here from Fortnite being competitive. This is evidence number 3. Those two connect. Now we get a claim number 4, that video games hold sport-like qualities when it comes to coordination, responsiveness, and stamina. For example, compare video games to a sport like baseball. So I love that. He's getting a specific sport. We're going to compare the two. This is just what we want. Just like you need coordination to catch a 90-mile-per-hour fastball in a glove or hit one with a bat, video games require players need coordination to strike at the perfect time, sync the technique they use on their controller with whatever their eyes are seeing unfolding on the screen. So we're getting good evidence here. Again, notice that Ryan is being woven in. Don't assume that it's from that source. We're getting a clear citation there, which is good. Video games require the ability to react quickly to certain movements like other sports do. A little bit of commentary discussion. Another reason video games should be considered a sport is that they require a certain amount of physical activity that may lead to straining. So we're getting another claim here. Claim number 5, that again connects esports with traditional sports. There are marathon gaming sessions where players are involved in rapid button pushing, continuous joystick shifting, and staring at the monitor for hours. So again, we get good citation here from Ryan. We know where it's from. I would say the one thing we're missing, we need a little commentary here at the end discussing all this stuff. Again, a few sentences, doesn't have to be a whole lot, but we like to discuss it. We went through some important claims here that do it. We have that video games are competitive like traditional sports. Video games require skill and coordination, even if you're not out of breath. And that there's definitely a physical aspect to video games. I mean, again, you may not be getting out of breath or running around, but there is a physical aspect. The commentary would basically just discuss those ideas in a little bit more detail. Okay, let's read the last thesis one here. Another way that esports are like traditional sports is the stadium environment where many tournaments take place. So a good, clear claim, I forget, is this 5 or 4? 6. Again, we're getting the comparison. Esports happen in arenas, just like traditional sports. Therefore, esports should be considered a real sport. Fans of video gamers also don't have to go to big arena to be able to watch their favorite player. Excuse me, hiccups. They can also stay at home and watch online. There are gaming arenas that can hold multiple people to watch pro players play games, but also young gamers aged 18 to 25 spend 3 hours and 25 minutes online watching other players play games. So again, we're still using Ryan. Professional NFL games from start to finish are a duration of a little over 3 hours. Seward. So just notice there, we're getting a new source, and we definitely want some ethos about him or her. The online audience is very similar to an audience at a stadium, as reported by Jason Dockman, chief editor at Sports Video Game News. So this time we do get good ethos about Jason here. That is good. With the BA in Media Communications, we get even more, which is excellent. The biggest dedication esports facility was open. Esports Stadium in Arlington is a $10 million, 100,000 square foot facility that holds around 250 to 2,500 spectators. Document. So again, we're getting a good citation there. New sentence, but with the citations being woven throughout. Granted, the audience is not as big as a football stadium of around 100,000 spectators, but both audiences support their favorite team or player for a long period of time, with the only difference being where. So I think we're getting a good comparison here. I love that they give us a specific comparison to football specifically, and we get the duration and the potential additions. I mean, talk about football stadiums, which I think at least 50,000, probably 80 or even 100,000 people. This would potentially be a potential opposing view that's a difference. That video games are not as popular, at least when it comes to being an arena, when it comes to sheer size. Okay, so let's review the main pieces that we talked about here. I'm going to create a separate video for the opposing view. But again, ethos is credibility or resume qualifications. What are your degrees? What's your work experience? Logos, we have logic, statistics, science, graphs and charts, and data. Pathos is emotion, so it could be humor, but also stories and anecdotes. Please remember that for essay 2, we need at least one example, one argument of each type, ethos, logos, pathos. You are allowed an optional personal pathos, but be aware that does not satisfy your pathos requirement for the paper. You need at least one example from the internet, please. And to review the quote sandwich pieces, you have your claim. This is the argument that you're making. In this case, with the paper we just read, the two sides were esports should be considered a sport as opposed to the opposing view. I'm going to create a second video for the opposing view in just a minute, and so it'll be posted. You'll be able to check that out. We need ethos for each author. Each time we meet an author, we definitely want to have some ethos about them. A half a sentence there is fine. Doesn't have to be a whole lot. Just remember that saying that they're the author of the article you're quoting is not enough. And again, if there is no author and you have a website title or a magazine title, give us some ethos about that source. If you're having trouble finding ethos, reach out to me and I will definitely help you find it. Or we may decide, which happens occasionally, that there isn't any. Sometimes authors just don't exist. Excuse me, talking is draining my voice. Then we have evidence, again, quote or paraphrase. Remember the block quote formatting that we talked about. Again, you have ethos, logos, pathos as a choice. Block quote is any quote that's 4 lines or longer. You are allowed one block quote in your paper. If you have more than one, you will lose some points. Having said that, if you have one that's 15 lines long, you'll lose points there as well. Solutions there are to cut down the quote. You can do this by paraphrasing parts of it or even cutting parts of the quote out and putting ellipses in there. Ellipses is those 3 dots. Looks like that. Those 3 dots, it looks like that. You can cut out parts of the quote if they don't have relevant information, and that can shorten things down. Then we want commentary. Discuss the claim and evidence in your own words. Again, at least a sentence, no more than 5. It's also a potential opportunity to transition into your next idea. Finally, we need citation. If you've introduced the author in the sentence, you don't have to cite again at the end, but we do want you to be weaving that citations throughout. So don't assume that because the first sentence in a paragraph is from a source, that all the sentences in the paragraph are from the same source. We definitely want you to be weaving those pieces throughout. Okay, that's it for the thesis. We will now check the next video out for opposing view when it comes to esports and whether or not they should be considered a sport.